Danny Dawson's life a living hell and that she needs more evidence for her murder investigation. Furthermore, the witness will testify that when a district attorney says something like this, you know it's time to run some tests, and that's why I decided to run some tests.
All right. So, based on the statement of the district attorney saying, I'm going to make Danny Dawson's life a living hell, how do you respond to that as far as the hearsay objection?
That it's not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, but for the effect it had on the listener.
And you're saying the effect is because he heard this statement,
He decided to run some tests.
Okay. Response?
Your Honor, if the defense is not using it for the truth of the matter asserted, then we ask that a jury instruction be made in order to say that it is not for the truth of the matter asserted.
Well, given the nature of the statement and the way that the witness is about to testify, I don't think that's an issue. And I will allow it if the testimony varies from the offer of proof. Certainly renew your objections, but until then, overrule.
Now, Mr. Foster, on scene, Ms. Sullivan told you that she was going to make Danny Dawson's life a living hell. Isn't that true?
She did say, she stated those words, yes.
She also told you that she needed more evidence for her murder investigation. Isn't that true?
Yes, but I think that came later on in the night when she made that statement.
And you would admit when a prosecutor makes statements like this, you know it's time to run a few tests, don't you?
Right, yeah, well, let's be clear about it. No, investigation will happen no matter what. Ms. Sullivan never stated that what tests I need to run. No, she never stated any of those things. Because of Ms. Dawson's slurred speech, because she stated that she needed another drink, I decided what tests needed to be ran, and I ran those tests.
And you run those tests because when a prosecutor says those words, you know it's time to start running some tests, don't you, Officer Foster?
An investigation would occur if she said something, if she didn't say anything,
So that would be a yes.
Did I say those words? Yes, I did.
But you were already knew what the results of those tests were going to be, didn't you?
I'm not Jesus, so I didn't know. Once I performed and administered those tests, then I found out, and it was official to me that I needed to take Ms. Dawson down to the station.
Well, Officer Foster, I'm talking about before you even ran the test, you were pretty sure about what the results were going to be, weren't you?
It seemed pretty evident once she started saying ABCs out of order that something was going on with her.
So that was a yes, you were already pretty sure about what the results were going to be.
Once I performed those tests, then I became sure.
Officer Foster, directing you back to my question. Before you ran the test, you were pretty sure about what the results were going to be, yes or no?
No, until I ran the test. That's when I became sure of what the results were.
So is that your testimony in court today?
Once she stated her ABCs, then I was pretty sure of what I performed some type of test in order to be sure that that she was going to be either drunk or that we can further the investigation.
Officer Foster, which one is it? Were you sure of the results before or after the test?
The slurred speech is an indication. But I didn't walk up and she said, "Hey, I think you're drunk."
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask you to instruct the witness to
And I will
answer a
at this
question.
time. Officer Foster, the opposing counsel is doing a pretty good job about asking you fair, concise questions. You need to do a better job about answering those questions. If there's something relevant as to the answer, then certainly it's okay to throw in a sentence about, yes, and the reason it's this. But you need to stop running so much.
Now, Officer Foster, let's try this one more time. Before you ran the test, you were pretty sure about what the results were going to be, weren't you?
Yes.
Now, you were sober that night, weren't you, officer?
Yes, I was.
And you believe that anyone that's sober could pass these field sobriety tests?
Yes, I do.
So you could have passed the test that night.
All 3 tests? Yes, I could.
Now, one of the tests you did was a split attention test, isn't that true?
Yes,
One has to stand on one foot
yes,
and count to some undisclosed number.
yes.
And you said one of the reasons Miss Dawson failed that test was because she stumbled and slipped. Isn't that true?
Yes,
But she did complain about the conditions of the roadway, didn't she?
she did. But that's, no, that's the reason we do more than one test, Your Honor.
That's right. Well, the other test was walking a line. Isn't that true?
That's true.
And the defendant also failed this test because she slipped and stumbled. Isn't that true?
Yes, she failed that test.
Now, Officer Foster, you hadn't been in a car crash that night, had you?
No, I have. No, I wasn't.
You hadn't had one of your good friends pronounced dead in front of you, had you?
No.
You hadn't been denied medical help after being in a car crash, had you?
No, I wasn't. No, I haven't.
However, even you slipped and almost fell that night, didn't you?
That's true.
Thank you. No further questions this time, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No redirect.
Oh,
Yes,
right.
left open to the section.
Well, we got, all right, so, trying to keep it sequential. At the very beginning of the direct, you ask him to introduce himself. And he says, hey, my name is Officer Ryan Foster. Typically, naturally in a conversation, oh yeah, where are you a police officer? Or, you know, what are, you know, but you go into school
Right.
and then you say,
So you want me to?
yeah,
okay.
follow up with the officer part first, because it's just a natural conversation flow. And then go into the school. And maybe I misheard it, but I think that a couple of times it was FCT and a couple of times it was FPC. So be careful about getting the letters correct. Kim, all attorneys need to, there was one part where you did an excellent job of showing everybody where you were going to go. You said, we'll get to that in a minute, but right now let's talk about X. All attorneys need to work things like that in your direct if you're changing major topics. It helps follow, because this is hard to follow. All right. You talk about you were going to give the standardized field sobriety test, and you called the station to make sure someone was there to give the test.
Right.
You need to clarify, you know, I was going to give the standardized field sobriety test, and I called to make sure somebody was on there at the station, you know, so that if she failed the test on the scene, they could do a follow-up test. Okay. And this is just kind of a technical police term, but you talked about, you know, all the precincts in the nation use them. It'd be all the departments.
Right.
You know, precinct is just like a little body of a department. Kim, you laid evidentiary foundation for pictures. but
Yeah,
never admitted.
because I was just thinking of my script, and that's what we practiced, and I realized I'm not doing that today because it wasn't prepared, so that kind of went over my head.
All right. Officer Foster, even though defense attorneys are all, you know, bottom of the barrel people, you still have to be polite to them and look at them when they're asking you a question on cross.
Right.
And, you know, as a police officer, you want to score points with the jury by being professional, just as professional with him as with your attorney. And so, you know, feel free to, you know, disagree with him, but, you know, still, you know, look at it and be respectful to him. And I know it's awkward to look at him and then turn to the jury,
Right.
but, you know, just go back and forth like that. And Brian, if you have a difficult witness like that and you stick to the point and you score points because of the fact that you are still getting the information you need. If he doesn't answer the question, you stay on it until he does, and if he does, you go on. So that can be a double-edged sword where you're scoring points. And I know people say don't interrupt a witness, but if you politely do it like at a sentence, end of a sentence or something, it's okay to interrupt a witness if you've got one running like that. That's what I wanted you to do, but you did fine. But you know, if he's interrupting, or if he says yes, and it was because this, as soon as he gets that stop of a sentence, get in your next question before he can keep going on with it. You know, interrupting that way. But you did a good job of letting him continue to run before asking for help. But at that point, any judge on earth would have said, yes, that's fine.
You're looking frustrated yourself.
Now, if a judge scolds you like that and says, hey, I tried to make sure that you understood, answer his question, but if you still have something to add it. Or don't feel like you can only say yes or no from that point on. Right. You know, if you've got a yes and the reason is this, feel free to say it. Okay, so don't, just because you get shot down, right, you know, don't go from one end to the other end, you know, just back off some.
Right.
All right. Brian, if you've got one, you got into you would admit that it's time to do a few tests after the prosecutor says that. You don't even have to get him to say something like that. All you have to do is say, she said that as statements, right? And immediately after she said that, you did the test. I mean, that shows it right there. You don't even have to get him to say, you would admit it's time to, you know.
Yeah.
Or you do it the other way and say, you know, so she made these statements, and then you ran all these tests, and that was right after she made those statements, wasn't it? So, I mean, it still gets the point across, and that way you don't, that can save you a little bit of argument.
Okay.
All right.
Just to be clear for closing, did we get just references to Santa Claus and Jesus? Is there anyone else?
Yeah, you got
Santa Claus and Jesus in one direct.
Yeah, you've got to be more as a police officer.
That's hilarious.
You have to be. And here's the real problem I have with mock trial. It sounds good to use the terminology that you did, like there was a passenger in the vehicle and the driver of the vehicle instead of car, and you know, using terms like that police officers use. Of course, the funny part of that is, in real life, they get on police officers all the time about using common language so you don't sound like a police officer. You know, they say, no, don't say that. Say the guy driving the car, you know, and stuff like that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but definitely keep some of the police lingo in. Right. But
So you wanted to do a little bit of both, like?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. But the main thing is you would get really penalized for being disrespectful to the defense attorney, even though he is against your side. You still have to be polite to him. Nathan?
I think one way you can do that is keep your orientation toward the judge, and when he asks you a question, you just look over your shoulder at him when he asks you a question, and then you're direct. So your attention is still on the jury, but you're making eye contact with the defense attorney. Now he looks like he's being a jerk by standing behind you, right, because you're oriented toward the jury. Why is he standing way back here? But you're being polite to him. As far as foster direct, I would say you need to quicken the pace. I'm always concerned about giving this comment. I would say you need to quicken your pace just a little bit on those answers. That doesn't mean go really fast. I think you've had a good pace, but maybe quicken it just a little bit faster. Not much. Okay, the driver was apologizing profusely. What was he saying? Bring out that kind of stuff as you're saying it. I think he said it later that he was saying he was tipsy or whatever the statement was. Of course, it's your duty to check on the other passengers. You want to emphasize the fact you were checking on the passenger because the defendant wasn't. He wasn't checking on the passengers, so you might make that a separate question. Was the defendant then? Was he checking on the passengers? No, I went in and checked on the passengers. Kim, I'd loop. I'd make a stop and I'd loop the answer. She needed another drink after he says that. I'd tack that on to your next question. So after the defendant said she needed another drink, what happened? You didn't say it a second time though, so y'all did emphasize it. Brian, it wasn't kind of clear with your objection that your objection was to methodology, not expertise. It lays more foundation as to expertise, but the objection was really to methodology, if I understood it right.
Which one?
And towards the
The first
beginning of
one.
all that, yeah.
Sobriety test?
Yeah. You know, it was,
Are you talking about the accident reconstruction or the sobriety test?
The reconstruction.
Yes.
But you laid, the way you originally said it was towards the foundation, and he definitely had the foundation, but when you
Oh,
did
yeah.
your board ire, it was clear that it wasn't the foundation that you had an issue with,
Right.
it was the
A lot of
methodology.
witnesses went, so, I'm sorry.
instead of saying pass, fail, I'd ask the officers, in your opinion, as an officer, you know, and I think you may have asked this, was he, you know, I can't remember the exact phrase. In your opinion, as an officer, Officer Foster, and all your expertise and experience, was Mr. Dawson in a condition where he could safely operate a motor vehicle on that evening? No. Instead of saying pass, fail, because you might get objections to pass and fail, you know, and I think that actually sounds a little bit better than just pass or fail test.
Could you ask, I'm sorry, could you ask like just, in your opinion, was Dwayne Dawson under the influence of alcohol?
Well, you can be under the influence of